on, everybody? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine, and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and the all-around tech guru. What's going on, Greg?
Oh, not much, Vinny. Just getting ready for what I think is going to be an interesting show.
Yeah, this one's cool, man. It's a bit of a departure from our normal like hot rod talk. This is like I mean, whenever we talk about the show, we talk about like when we pitch to potential guests, we say, oh, we've had, journalists, manufacturers, racers, all kinds of people on the show. And I guess this one would fall under manufacturer, don't you think?
I don't know, man. I mean, as the editor of Engine Labs, I feel like I'm instantly supposed to not like this guy.
Well, I'll say he's super knowledledgeable about his area of expertise, and I would argue that he's probably knowledgeable about ours too, if you asked him. But
I mean, let's not dance around the fact. I mean, it has to do with electric vehicles. They know this because they've read the
title for sure.
I don't think EVs are the devil. I really don't. I mean, I know I'm the editor of Engine Labs. I'm supposed to be fighting EVs tooth and nail.
Yeah, dude, you're not the editor of Motor Labs.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be like, that's a whole different discussion. The motor versus engine. But I know I'm supposed to be like running around setting EVs on fire because, they don't consume.
They'll do that themselves, won't they?
Yeah, right. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm just saying I'm not supposed to like them, and I am not as anti-EV as I know a lot of people would like me to be.
No, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat, man. I run two hot rod magazines between Street Muscle and Rod Authority. People would think that like, I got motor oil in my veins, and for all intents and purposes, I do. But I'm not resistant to electric vehicles, man. I think they're cool. The performance that you can get out of them is amazing, and we only have progress to make. Look at how far we've come just in the past, 15, 10, 5 years. It's pretty crazy, man. The thing that I don't like, and I think that most people will agree with, if the comment section is any indicator, is the autonomous portion, right? Like nobody wants a car that drives for them, but people want fast cars. People want cars that are good for the environment. People want, a lot of different things. And if you can have a complete package minus the sound of an internal combustion engine, because that's the one thing.
But that plays such a big part, man. I was watching videos of the 1400 horsepower Cobra Jet from the NMRA World Finals. And I mean, it's cool, but I felt like I was watching the video on mute. Like it was missing something. And I was trying to be like really heady about it and try to evaluate what it was that didn't sit right with me. And what it came down to was, without the sound, there's not that emotional feeling, that gut.
I would agree. For the spectator, yes. For the spectacle of it, yes. But when you're sitting behind the wheel of that thing and you're making a pass in it, I don't think you're going to lose anything, man. When you're going that fast and you're getting that kind of performance out of a vehicle, you're not going to care about the sound as much as the person watching. You probably still will, but I don't know, man. But we're getting off on a little bit of a tangent here. We're supposed to be talking about our guest, Mr. Lewis Black, CEO of Almonty Industries. Almonty Industries is a tungsten mining company, and it's one of the only direct raw material competitors to the Chinese market. I'm reading here. Tungsten is a rare earth critical mineral that is used in the lithium-ion batteries that power electric vehicles, which is why Greg and I are talking about electric vehicles so heavily. Without tungsten, the batteries literally cannot be made. Lewis goes into a little bit, but just for argument's sake, everybody talks about lithium-ion batteries. Well, lithium is the majority of the battery, but it can't be charged or hold a charge without some other materials, one of them being tungsten, a very important material. So without further ado, I guess let's get into the interview with Lewis, and we'll let him explain some of the finer points of battery manufacturing and all of the political implications that it carries with it. Lewis Black, everyone. Hey, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. So, we wanted to have you on because I'm sure, well, Gavin Newsom, our fearless leader here in California, he just recently passed some legislation relating to the electric vehicle market and the emissions in California that we're experiencing. And basically, he wants to go zero emissions by 2035 for all new vehicle sales. I'm not telling you anything new, but you have some interesting insights on that as the CEO of a lithium mining company. A tungsten mining company. See, that's my brain playing a trick on me, because when we think of electric vehicles, I think most people think of lithium, but you were just explaining to me why that's rapidly changing. Can you touch on that?
Well, I mean, lithium is the engine of the battery, but in order for that to be useful, it needs to be charged. And traditionally, you've used cobalt, but cobalt's very expensive. It's a carcinogen, and it comes from a location in the world that perhaps is not as transparent as it should be. What's been developed is a cathode using tungsten and niobium, which is meeting the sort of challenge of the holy grail of being able to charge a battery very quickly. So they're already using it in wind and solar farms, because obviously you don't have wind and the sunshine 24 hours a day, so you have to be able to charge the batteries very quickly. And now it's transitioning over to EVs, which will enable you to charge a car in less than 10 minutes, which ultimately is going to prove to be much more acceptable to the consumer.
Right, because that's the huge disparity between internal combustion engine and electric motor, is the fact that, once your range is done, you're down for, a considerable amount of time, whereas, you just pump your gas and it takes you 10, 15 minutes. So I'm curious, you had a pretty hot take on what's going on with this legislation that just passed. How does it affect your market, and why does it not bode well for ours?
Well, I think ultimately, obviously every great idea has to be followed up with a great plan. And essentially, I think California has the biggest take-up of electric vehicles in the world. I think 3% of vehicles are EVs. But if you start to increase that to the levels that the governor is looking for, you've got to ask yourself, how are you actually going to produce these vehicles? The raw materials just aren't available to be able to do it. The technology is still basically learning as it moves forward, as all new technologies do. It is an emerging technology. And then it comes to the point, well, you've got to power these vehicles. And I believe even this weekend in Northern California, they're actually they're expecting blackouts because you're expecting strong winds. So, the power grid is something which has to be looked at. Now, does the governor come forward, with a plan to address all these issues and all on this topic? Probably, but until such time, I don't know how you're going to develop even the raw material supply chain to be able to produce the number of vehicles you're going to require by 2035.
Well, raw material supply chain aside, I do want to talk about that. But do you think 15 years is an adequate amount of time to just install an infrastructure to support that?
No, I really don't. From going back to raw materials, you're not going to be able to even develop those raw material supply chains in that time. It takes you more than 10 years to develop a mine from start to finish. So I just can't see how you're going to achieve it in 15 years.
Well, not only that, but I couldn't tell you where the nearest EV charging station is to me, and I mean that has to do with the fact that I don't own an EV. But did I? If I did, I don't think it's as close as the nearest gas station. I can tell you that. And so once you have the rest of that sorted out, then there's a lot of other things that we need to figure out, like where these vehicles are going to be charged. Are we going to start taking down gas stations? I'm not sure. But so you say that your company is a little bit interesting in the fact that it's one of the only companies not based in China that's a competitor in the market. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we're the primary producer of tungsten concentrate outside of China, but China accounts for 83% of the world's production. But our customers are all Western based, all vertically integrated. And they're involved from aerospace to automotive to medical to defense. So tungsten is a very strategic metal. It's constantly being adapted into new technologies, and obviously the fast charging of batteries is one of the latest ones. But the metal is a scarce resource. It's a declining resource. It's very difficult to produce, and there are very few viable deposits globally outside of China.
On the on that table of elements, where does tungsten land in rarity?
Oh, it's pretty much up in the sort of top 2%.
Oh, wow.
And it's a very unusual metal because it's very brittle, but it's very durable, and its smelting point is slightly less than the temperature of the sun. So they use it for shielding in fusion reactors, for instance, in the fusion reactors they're building in France now. This is the only metal that exists that can actually protect the reactor from creating a star in the reaction. It can contain it. So it is a very unusual metal.
Yeah, that's sounds like it's got some really interesting properties that are way above my head. Earlier, you mentioned that cobalt was what we were using before, but we're getting away from that now because of various reasons. You mentioned that the places in the world that cobalt is mined aren't as transparent as the places that tungsten is. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Well, I mean, cobalt predominantly is from the DRC, and so it has a reputation for conflict materials, child labor. Or the transparency of the supply chain is very difficult to establish. And I think that's a great concern to companies such like Tesla, who have really sort of blazed the way forward for EVs. They've made EVs much more mainstream. I think beforehand, you had to perhaps wear flip-flops and shorts and drive a Prius. That was the image. Whereas Tesla has done an incredible job of mainstreaming an electric vehicle. And I think all the conservative car manufacturers, and they are conservative companies, long established, very mature, have essentially followed Tesla into this. I don't think they would have gone to the extent they have and the money they've invested had Tesla not been so successful.
Well, Tesla's kind of like the big dog in this conversation, but every other auto manufacturer is following suit, and they're doing so at a rapid pace. I mean, Chevy, Ford, they are hot on its heels. They're making extremely viable options in that market. So it begs a question: as the CEO of a tungsten mining company, doesn't this bode well for you? This legislation that Gavin Newsom passed, it would be beneficial to your company. So why take issue with what's going on?
Well, it's not so much issue. It's a question of a realistic approach. If we're going to be called on to provide vast amounts of tungsten, we need a plan.
I see. If there were a plan, what do you envision that? Something that would work, or is it even possible?
Well, I mean, someone said to me earlier today that when JFK said we're going to send a man to the moon, and he didn't announce the plan there and then, everyone thought he was a little bit out of his mind. And then, of course, NASA, put together a team that, in fact, made that come to fruition. I think ultimately that if you're going to make a proclamation such as this, there has to be supported by a plan that not just encourages people to go into cars with tax incentives and rebates, but also that there's a power grid infrastructure. As you said, what's going to happen with gas stations? Are you going to combine that with charging stations? There must be a very well thought out plan. NASA didn't get guys to the moon just because they thought it was a good idea over a drink. It took many years and billions of dollars and some of the smartest guys on the planet to make that happen. I don't see this as any different. This is a transitional shift, an enormous shift of how we actually transport ourselves. I mean, for more than 100 years since the Model T, we've worked in a certain way with combustion engine. And now they're saying combustion engine is dead, the electric vehicle is in. For our point of view, we use tungsten in both combustion engine manufacture and also in EVs. So we are fine with both approaches. But if there is going to be this enormous shift, we believe as a company there has to be a great plan behind it so we can plan. So we can plan to produce the tungsten that is required to supply the market.
Well, it is a limited resource, as you said. So if you were called upon and you said, we need 10 times as much, or I don't even know the figure, but more, what does that look like on your end? Is that something that's even possible since it's a limited resource?
Well, I mean, I suppose we're rather lucky because we actually own the world's largest tungsten mine in South Korea, which we've actually just now started to construct, and there's 70 plus years of reserves there. So increasing, output from that, it won't be simple, but it is very doable if there is a plan in place. But remember, we only use a little bit of tungsten in everything. Everything that uses tungsten only uses a little bit of it. So we don't consume hundreds of tons in every application. We use essentially ounces of it. I mean, without it, the product doesn't work. In a cathode, you're using milligrams. I mean, they're tiny fractions of tungsten. But there still has to be a plan for us to be able to plan to supply that market.
Right. There's an argument in the automotive space that going green with an electric vehicle isn't exactly going green because of all the supply chain involved, specifically mining. Do you have any thoughts on that you can share with us?
Well, I mean, all of our customers wish. I mean, we're all analyzed now for our carbon output. This is important to all of our customers. Again, in South Korea, we're very fortunate that we have the opportunity to be a carbon neutral mine because we're supplied from the local nuclear power station. It's a bit of an anomaly. It wasn't by design. It was a consequence of us, the location and where this power station was. But I agree that there is that argument. You can, with one hand, go EV, which of course reduces emissions in cities, but then you're burning fossil fuels to power them. So I think that all has to be part of this plan of moving across to EVs. NASA didn't just build the rocket, they built the lander as well. So, there was a whole program that went into place. I think that is a very good conversation. How do you now look at producing more renewable energy, more efficient renewable energy to supply all these additional EVs?
So you mentioned that your mine is in Korea, and that's the largest in the world. Is that the only one? Yeah. Okay, so that's one of them. What are the locations of your other mines?
Spain and Portugal. So all of our customers insist we work in safe jurisdictions with legal systems, because our customers are ultimately, where Boeing, Airbus, the car manufacturers, they have a very specific demand for transparency. And I like to sleep at night. So I like to be in an environment where the president's son doesn't decide he wants to be in the tungsten mining business in the morning, and I find the place repainted by the time I get to work. So we can be cost competitive with the Chinese. We invest heavily in technology. That's the nature of being in the business we're in. We have to be competitive.
In your opinion, what separates your practices from theirs? Is it simply ethical, or is it deeper than that?
When you say theirs, you mean
the Chinese market?
Well, the Chinese, listen, they're very good operators. There's no doubt about it. Some of the best in the business. We're considered the best outside of China, but there's some great operators there. I think they have an access to capital that has, as masquerades as state loans, but ultimately as a subsidy. It's never ultimately paid back. And so, because it's a strategic metal, that places a different sort of sense of security that they have compared to what we have to live with. Environmentally, they're getting much better. We know because we've assisted them in environmental compliance. So I don't think there's an awful lot that separates us anymore. I mean, I think technically we're probably far superior because we have to be cost competitive. But I don't think that the old stories of them dumping stuff in rivers, that's long behind them. They're much more environmentally compliant. I think it's a question of political system that if you have a contract in China and there is an issue within China, that contract will no longer be honored because the state trumps everything. So the state has the final say. If it's in the national interest, any other commitments a company has made is out the window.
Interesting. So do you think that tungsten could ever reach that level of nefarity that cobalt had attached to it? Or is that not possible because of the players?
Well, I think the players it's a much more mature market, but it's an inert metal. So cobalt is a carcinogen. You know, if you're going to produce millions upon millions of batteries that will end up in landfills, ultimately the cobalt in those cathodes will get into the groundwater, and that will be a medium to long-term problem as a carcinogen. Tungsten is inert. I mean, it's very dense, has the same density as gold. I wouldn't recommend eating it because it probably wouldn't do your digestion an awful lot of good, but you would survive it. You know, you're just putting a heavy, dense, inert product into your body. We don't have carbon gases, so the mines are safe. They're not non-explosive as such. So it's a very different basis. But also, I think the market is so mature that our customers have sort of built into their model a transparent supply chain. So it would be very difficult for conflict material to come to market.
You know, you touched on something a moment ago, and you said that your technologies are superior. Do you see the Chinese market contributing to that technological advancement, or are they just mining the materials and that's it?
They mine. I mean, ultimately, the incentive to be more technologically advanced in China is limited because you have a base cost. We have to, in order to be cost competitive. So we have to always be refining our processes to be more efficient. But ultimately, China doesn't have that pressure. So the incentive to actually become more advanced is not there. And
that's what you consider to be a cause of a state-run economy?
Look, I mean, as I said, it's a different political system that has different reasons for getting out of bed, and we're 5 generations of tungsten miners. So, you know, how we do it now is very different to how it was done 5 generations ago. We've had to evolve to survive. That's why we've survived, and that's why we're the primary source.
That makes sense. You were touching on the toxicity of cobalt, and, you know, getting back into the earth, you know, once those batteries are thrown away. Is tungsten a recyclable material? Is it something that can be, you know, taken out of those batteries once they're useless?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, currently, up to 50% of all tungsten consumption outside of China is recycled tungsten. Tungsten is very durable. So they've been heavily into recycling now for the last decade. All of our customers have extensive recycling buyback programs. So if they supply the tools or the parts to, I don't know, Ford, when those parts, where the inserts to produce the vehicle, when they're worn, they are then recycled back to the manufacturer. So it's been a big push in the last 10 years. And China doesn't recycle anywhere close to what they do in the West. So again, this fits in with the policies of our customers of being more sustainable.
I know that I'm asking you a lot of EV questions, and if you're not comfortable answering, that's fine. But you seem very knowledgeable on the subject, so I'm picking your brain. How long is the life of a typical EV battery nowadays compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Well, I mean, I think they're incomparable. I think in terms of duration, it's an evolving process. As they try and meet the holy grail of fast charge times and obviously longevity, I think this data will keep emerging and keep being refined. I don't think there's any one-set answer, but between now and 15 years ago, it's incomparable. I know in mining, there's a big push now by mining equipment manufacturers to electrify. And we as a company are excited by this because ultimately it means less emissions underground, which means cheaper ventilation, more balanced temperatures, noise pollution is reduced. So there's many benefits. But right now the batteries cannot last a shift. They cannot last 8 hours. And so on that basis, we can't use it. But they think within 24 months, they will achieve that level of durability. And so I think the question you ask is, I couldn't give you the data because I think the data is evolving every day.
Gotcha. Yeah. You know, when I think it's interesting though, and I know these are completely different, but when I think about like a cell phone, right? A cell phone from 10 years ago will still hold a charge on its old battery, but, you know, a new cell phone after a couple of years, it seems that it doesn't hold a charge as long. Is that something that you anticipate happening with these EVs? I think you just answered it, but, you know, I think that's a concern that a lot of people have. Like, how long am I going to be able to keep that that expensive electric vehicle once the battery starts to go. But as you mentioned, it's constantly evolving.
But I think ultimately that when an EV has two things it has to do. It has to be able to match the range of a gasoline vehicle, and you have to be able to charge it at the same rate you fill a tank of gas. And I think if you don't maintain that, the EV is unsaleable. The consumers won't stand for it. With the phones, we seem to be a lot more understanding the fact that our phone doesn't lie. I mean, for some reason, there's no riots in the street. We just say, well, you know, it's the same for everyone else. Never mind. We kind of live with it. But a car, this is a very much more, has much more presence in your life. If your phone runs, you know, out of battery, you can probably go for an hour or so before losing your mind. But if you're on a trip with your family and you run out of juice halfway there, and there's nowhere to charge your vehicle, you know, you're going to end up in the woods, which you don't want to do. So I think it's a very different comparison.
Right, I agree.
Will be much less on a vehicle.
Lewis, it seems that you've been on a bit of almost like a press tour with this information, because I don't think it was readily available. I don't think most people knew about this. And like I said at the beginning of our podcast, and when people think of EV batteries or just batteries in general, nowadays they think lithium, not tungsten. But you brought this information to the mainstream.
Lithium is very much the core of the battery, but to charge it, you need a cathode. And it's the makeup and content of that cathode, which is what has evolved significantly recently.
Well, I'm curious, what was the impetus for wanting to get this information out there, and what do you feel that you owe the general public with this information?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that there really is enormous steps to move the electric vehicle more into the mainstream with the ability to charge it quickly. I think that the cobalt is a powerful lobby. They're not going to give up this tenure. I think Tesla has been the first company to say, look, we're getting rid of cobalt because it's expensive, because it's a carcinogen. I think that I think the general public has to understand that there's a lot of really smart people working on this because the consumers are demanding it, not governments. The consumer is driving this. 15 years ago, we were using flip phones, and we never imagined that we could email on them. I mean, if you were a Trekkie, yes, you did, but that was more out of sort of wishful thinking than actually based on any hard facts. Now we take it for granted. The consumer demanded more of that product, and I believe it's the same with the EVs, that you are going to be able to charge these batteries rapidly. And I think that's going to be a real game changer for how people perceive electric vehicles. And that's the consumer, not the government, that's moved that along.
Do you think that that's a good thing for the consumer to have that such a high demand, or do we need to get back to being accustomed to having less disposable products?
Well, that's a very different question. I think the consumer is going to demand performance of these EVs. I think that right now they are a luxury vehicle that a luxury item that you can sort of poodle around town in, but maybe you can go out to your beach house because it's 100 miles away, but that's about it. No one's looking at sort of long-term, long trips in this. The consumer is demanding they must be able to match what is already available in gasoline vehicles. When you can do that, there will be a much stronger take-up of EVs. I genuinely believe that. Tesla has made EVs cool. And I'm a petrol head. And 24 months ago, I kind of came to the realization that I can't fight progress. If I turn up now, with a V12, which is, obviously the one childhood thing that the smell, everything, to me is, they could bury me with a V12 and I'd be happy. But you turn up now to anywhere in something like this, people are looking at like you've sort of, you're walking around with a cell phone that's like a brick.
Well, I think things are still a bit different over here because if you pulled up in a V12, I'd be all over it. I would ask you for a ride. That's for sure. But
now it's hybrids. Now they produce these vehicles with hybrids that outperform, and that I think to me is I prefer. I embrace EVs, but I like hybrids more if I was asked for my preference.
Why is that?
Because I've still got one hand in the old world and I've got one hand in the new world.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you said that, EVs have become cool because of Tesla, especially today, because they just announced that they dropped the price of a new Model S to $69,000, I think. Yeah, just a hair over $69,000, which is incredible for the performance that you get out of that car. So I'm curious though. It seems that Elon and Gavin Newsom as well, they kind of put the cart before the horse when they're talking about things that they can do or want to do. Is that a trend that you've seen across the EV market, or is it just part of big business?
I think that there's a fundamental difference between obviously the governor and obviously Elon Musk. I think Elon, he essentially comes up with an incredible idea, and then he spends a lot of time trying to work out how to enact it. And often he's very successful in doing it. I think that it sort of differentiates from a politician who may come up with a great idea, but then doesn't really come up with a plan to see it through. And I could be very wrong. There could have been many hours of, or many days or weeks or months of work done by the governor's office to come up with how to get from A to B, from now to full EV take up. So I think it's a very different, but I think Elon Musk is motivated by a consumer, whereas obviously a governor is motivated more by a vote. So I think it's a different reason to get out of bed.
Noted. Follow through, I guess, would be the discerning point then for those.
Well, the problem as a politician that you always face is that follow through. If the follow through doesn't work, they'll hold you responsible. So risk is not something that you really want to embrace as a politician, because risk can bring failure. Failure means, well, the election is over. So it's Elon Musk, on the other hand, the thought of failure is what drives any engineer. An engineer is there to find a solution, but if they fail, they don't see it as a failure. They just see it as a learning curve, so they can move on to be better at it next time. It's a very different, I think, way of looking at the same issue.
Well, how quickly do you think that this follow through needs to happen on Gavin's end? How quickly do we need to come up with a plan if this is going to be enacted in 15 years?
Oh, I've got it. Sorry, there's a storm outside and it's telling me my internet connection is unstable. So have you still got me?
Yeah.
Great. No, I think ultimately that really now, I mean, if you're going to start putting, charging stations throughout the state, if you're going to look at how to produce the majority of your power through renewable energy so that you're not sort of replacing one pollution with another. If you're going to be looking to the car manufacturers to start really investing so heavily to be able to bring this number of vehicles, you've got to start now. 15 years is we all remember what we were doing 15 years ago, and it doesn't seem that long ago.
What can we as consumers, voters, people with the real power do to help this along?
Well, I think ultimately is to continue to speak to your local representative and say, where is my infrastructure? I want an electric car, but I want to be able to not have to travel 30 miles to charge it. What's the plan? And to the electric car manufacturers, keep doing what you're doing. Every month seems to bring another innovation. That's, if I look at a Tesla now and what it was 4 years ago, it's almost unrecognizable. And a lot of the ideas Tesla have brought, the larger, screens internally, autonomous driving, these are being adopted now in the mainstream. The consumer is liking very much what they're seeing. I mean, there are taxis in Paris that are Teslas. I mean, who would think?
Incredible.
And the drivers who generally complain about everything, actually like their car, which was extraordinary, because before they were in hybrids like Prius, and they would complain from the moment they pick you up to the moment they drop you off. You know, the car, the traffic. That now Teslas, they talk you through the car while you sit there.
Yeah, it's what a time to be alive.
Well, I mean, let's not go too far.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could go either way with that saying.
Yes.
But Louis, I know that you're constantly traveling and you're a very busy, man. So we won't take up too much of your time. But as we wind down here, do you have any parting shots? Do you have any last thoughts? Do you have anything that you would like to say to the American public, man?
Well, I mean, look, I'm an Englishman who's naturalized American, and everything I've been able to build in this company is because of my relationship with the United States. You know, most of our product goes into the United States and then is re-exported to Europe and to Japan. Innovation, all of our technical innovations have come from the US, have been developed in the US. And Europe has also followed very strongly behind them. I would say that at this moment, EV technology is led entirely by the United States, and the rest of the manufacturers are really doing they're taking those ideas and developing them even further. But I think the consumer in the US has really contributed to the way that EVs have been embraced by the rest of the world. I really do believe this. They have done an incredible job to take something so mainstream. When we've had other technologies like LPGs and ethanol that are also low emissions, have not captured the imagination that the American consumer has done with electric vehicles.
Well, Louis, thank you so much for your time. Where can we see you next? I know, like I said, you've been on a little bit of a tour. Is there anything that we can read about you or your company? Where can we send people to learn more about this?
Well, I mean, you can always go to our website at www.almonty.com. And Erica who's running all the roadshow, she lets me know moments before I have to appear.
Well, we're extremely grateful for your time.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much. And I don't think this will be the last time that I reach out to you. Thank you, Louis.
No problem. Been a pleasure. Thanks very much. Be safe.
You too.
Take care, guys. Take care.
So there you have it, Greg. Man, huge shout out to Louis Black, CEO of Almonty Industries, man. That was really cool. I learned a lot on this episode. I want to pick his brain for like another hour and just find out how, electric vehicle batteries work, how their motors work. And I'm sure he could dive into all that, but I didn't want to like burn your guys' brains out or mine, because we wanted to talk about like some pointed issues in this episode. And thank you, Louis. That was cool.
That really was cool. I mean, and one thing I was thinking during the whole thing, he's talking about how, limited resource tungsten is and all that. And all I can think about is tungsten wedding rings and, tungsten rings. And I'm like, I know that the rarity of a material, affects how desirable it is as jewelry, right? But I'm wondering, I wonder how many, welding electrodes I could get out of a tungsten ring, that we're using it for jewelry.
That didn't even cross my mind when we started talking about tungsten, but I don't know. When he said that tungsten is in like the top 2% of rare earth metals, like that's pretty crazy, man. And we need it for these EVs. And, I appreciated his take on a lot of these things. I kind of came into the interview expecting him to be like, have like a negative tone on all this, but he was very practical in all of his answers. And I think he has some real world concerns, but
a lot of real world insight.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when he said they're 5th generation tungsten miners, like that blew me away.
Yeah. Well, I think we use it, he touched on it, but we use it in a lot of other things besides just electric vehicle batteries. I mean, and you just touched on it too, aside from, funny rings, but, like welding equipment, countless electronics, tungsten's used in a lot of stuff.
Yeah. But, I mean, he mentioned it. I think he called them munitions, but
oh yeah,
the penetrator on like Tank Buster.
Yeah. Is that the same on like those 5.56 rounds?
No, that's just mild steel.
Oh, that's right, steel penetrator.
Yeah, but I mean, but there is the M995. I think, don't quote me on that, round, which is a tungsten penetrator, but it's the black tip that you can't find anywhere. But no, I mean, think about the penetrators on tank rounds. You know, the armor piercing, fin stabilized, discarding sabot. Oh my God, how did I remember that from my childhood? I remember a book I had on tanks. But it's just got a big ass tungsten penetrator, and it uses just kinetic energy. It's not explosive at all.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, tungsten is really cool. And one thing, I mean, I know a lot of our audience probably has tungsten rings, you know, because that's really cool. But it's an extremely hard metal. And everybody, you know, I've been told several times by several different, you know, guys in shops, you shouldn't wear that because if your finger gets caught in something, they have to cut your finger off because they can't cut through it.
Yeah.
There's a trick, and you can go on YouTube.
Hard material, right?
Yeah, but so you can't cut through it. But if you go on YouTube, you can see the trick. You basically lock it up with channel or locking pliers.
Yeah.
And then you smack it and it shatters it because it's brittle.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's what Lewis was saying. It's a very brittle metal.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so weird. It's like, you know, you use it as a welding electrode, but then you give it one little smack and it breaks.
I'm just looking up the hardness scale for tungsten.
Yeah, I mean, tungsten is a cool metal.
Okay, so Google's giving me a Rockwell hardness of Carbidex. I don't know how to read this, Greg. You're gonna have to look at it and use your tech guru skills to disseminate this information, because I'm just gonna sound like an idiot if I try to explain it.
Well, what we're using is tungsten carbide. I mean, tungsten as a raw element, I honestly don't know how useful that is.
Right. Apparently it's extremely useful, but I mean, I see what you're saying.
He mentioned something about tungsten. I don't know what mixture, what alloy they're using in the battery stuff, but like the welding electrode and the rings are tungsten carbide, so it's mixed with carbide.
You know, I really enjoy talking to people who are very knowledgeable about a subject that I know nothing about, because then number one, the interview works out better because I just throw a bunch of questions at them and then they answer them, and so it turns out well. But also I learned so much. You know, like I said, I could probably pick his brain for another hour, but I thought it was really cool. He touched on some subjects that I wanted to know more about, so I hope our audience appreciated it, and I think so, even though it was a little bit different than our normal hot rod stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, it was so interesting. Like I was sitting here, you know, monitoring, and I was just glued to the interview.
Yeah, I think you know, if people give it a chance, they'll do the same thing. I know you're the tech guru, so you kind of you like stuff like this, and so do I. But you know, it's the way of the future, man. And I'm not saying that you know I'm going to start writing electric muscle or anything like that, but I do want to know more about it. I want to know as much about it as I can, because if there's a way to hot rod these electric vehicles, I want to find out how. For sure. I mean, I've been accused of not embracing new technology. I mean, I can give you a real example. When DSLR cameras started shooting video, I was pretty against it. I mean, I remember having discussions with people going, if you want to take video, buy a video camera. SLR cameras are for taking pictures. I'm recording now on a DSLR, and I think I just take a while to come around to new technology, to accept it. You know what I mean? I think that's everyone. You know, you get used to a certain thing. It's hard to let go. But
yeah, I mean, I definitely am learning to embrace things a little sooner than I used to. Because I mean, it literally took me 10 years.
Well, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. If someone tossed you a keys to that electric Cobra jet you were talking about earlier, would you say no?
Hell no, but they'd catch me in what, 200 miles? They'd run out. Of course I'd take it, and I'd take off with it. Yeah. We've actually had this conversation with Ford when they told me how quickly they could find me if I decided to leave with the car.
Yeah, man. But you know, I'm excited. It makes me it's exciting for me, right? I just like cars.
Yeah.
I like cars, man. But anyways, again, thank you, Lewis. Appreciate your time, man. For those of you who want to go check it out, go to almontyindustries.com and read up on the technology that they're cooking. But Greg, what's going on Engine Labs as far as projects? We're in an interesting situation for this episode because we're pre-recording, so I won't ask you what editorial is up currently on Engine Labs, but what is going on with Engine Labs projects?
Well, I'm sure eagle-eyed viewers will notice some changes. Number one, the hat doesn't have a Mustang on it, and that isn't saying anything against, my love for the Mustang. But it could be explained by something.
Yeah, what's that over your shoulder, man? Those look like cathedral port heads. What's going on?
Those are cathedral port heads. Those are a project I am getting ready to dive into.
Wait a second.
I know.
Is that an LS, Greg?
Yes, the Ford guy has finally decided to play with an LS.
Yeah, so you wanted to be like all the other fast Ford guys.
Oh.
Hey, look, man, there have been a few seasons of Power Automedia's Horsepower Wars, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the winners have used a particular combination that's worked out well for them.
Well, yes and no. The winners used an LS in the first season.
Okay.
And then the second season, it was 3 LSs and 1 big block Chevy.
That's true.
And I can't divulge season
comment
3.
on season 3.
But I will say this. The reason everybody has gone LS in season 2, because I talked to these guys, I did all those engine profiles. It's simply a cost thing. I mean, there's no denying that with an LS, some of the guys just did stock bottom end, some guys mess with some stuff. There's no denying that this can be done cheaply.
That's a good point, because we also saw that, and we're getting off on a total tangent here, but we also saw that a big block Chevy is also a viable option if you build it the right way.
Yeah, well, yeah, but they did run into some pricing issues with components. I mean, and they're running on $10,000 to build the entire car. My hats are off to all of them. I'm not going to, Monday morning quarterback any of their choices. They all, busted their asses. But I get it. I think the big block.
All right. I'm sorry I said that you're going to be like all the other fast Ford guys. Greg, just tell us about the LS.
Well, I'm not telling you anything. It's an LS. And you'll see stuff.
Okay. All right.
Unfortunately, I've been a little delayed. My goal, like right now, was to have the engine completely torn down by now. And as you can see, there's still heads on. There's no intake, but it didn't come with an intake. I mean, I was just, but yeah, I've got to start, spinning some wrenches on this.
Can you even tell us which version it is?
Yeah, I can confidently say, and without revealing too much, it's a 4.8. It's a Gen 4 4.8. So,
very cool, man. So, new project for Engine Labs. Everybody keep an eye out for that. But he's keeping a tight lid on that one, so that's okay. Street Muscle. Like I said, we're pre-recording this kind of far in advance due to Lewis's schedule. And so I can't give an accurate description as to what's currently up on the site. I will just say that we're constantly cranking out great content for you guys. We have a bunch of features up right now. We have tech articles, anything that the car guy or girl would want. So head over to streetmusclemag.com, head over to enginelabs.com.
So do I not get to bring up your project that you're playing with right now?
Oh yeah, where I was yesterday. That's right.
Yeah. Can we not bring that up? Can we talk
about? Sure, we can. We can. Yeah. So I was inspired. If you guys will remember back a few episodes, what was it? Episode like 31 or 32.
I think it might have been 30, but not too far back.
Yeah. So not too far back, we had our buddy Ivan Korda on. And he's building a wicked F100. I want to say it was a 69 or a 70 Ford F100. It's up on FordMuscleMagazine.com. actually, I think it's just FordMuscle.com, but Ford Muscle Magazine. So anyways, he's building this wicked Pro Touring F100. And you guys know me, I'm a little bit of a Chevy guy, and I love square bodies. So recently I had a chance to, pick up a little 84 C10 step side, really cool little truck. Greg, I don't know if we want to throw up a photo, we can. But yeah, we've already kind of dove into it, and we're already tweaking it and messing with it. But my goal is to build a budget Pro Touring truck with that. And I don't know if those two words go together, budget and Pro Touring, but it's a challenge, and I think I'm going to try and tackle it. That way I can go chase Ivan around the autocross whenever the time comes.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a cool little, it's like the big brother, little brother almost, with the little brother kind of nipping at the heels. Except
Ivan is younger than I am. Okay.
Well, I'm just saying that the concept of a budget thing, you always expect the budget not to.
Well, I think it's important for the street muscle audience and just like hot rodding in general, like to be inclusive, right? Because while Ivan's truck is so cool, if the average enthusiast wanted to build the same exact truck at home, it would be, pretty pricey because he's using premium components. He's using, a brand new engine from Ford, the Illuminator. So, it's being built to the nines. And, my contention is that you might not be able to build the exact same performance, for less or half or a fraction of the cost. But I think you could go out there and have some fun, and that's the goal.
Well, I think honestly, if we ever get you guys in the same spot, on the same course, we're going to have to switch drivers at some point.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course, because you have to do a proper scientific comparison. Yeah. And but I think it'll be cool, if we do, Chevy versus Ford and we use similar drivetrains. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's gonna be a fun project. But anyways, yeah, like I was saying, check out streetmusclemag.com, check out fordmuscle.com, check out enginelabs.com, all the magazines under the Power Automedia banner. And as always, tune in 12 Pacific time for the RodCAST right here. And check us out on YouTube under Power Automedia as well. I think that's it, Greg.
Yep.
We'll catch you next time, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, drop a like, comment, subscribe.